big welcome, Bob, and thanks for joining from the US. The company that Bob represents is PhD, and I've had a really good look around website case studies, and your customers regularly comment about your solution being extremely affordable. That's one of the key comments that I picked out. IDC, the premier global intelligence company, said that you guys delivered, in inverted commas, measurable cost savings. And Hart, the global manufacturers of cooking equipment, including for the KFC chain, said, in inverted commas, PhD makes backing up there in virtual environment a piece of cake. I thought it may have been a bit more appropriate to say a piece of chicken, but anyhow, a piece of cake. You guys have experienced 12 consecutive quarters of growth, and that's huge, especially in the recent economic downturn. They've got over 5,000 customers. They're the two-time winner of the Best of VMworld award, and they're actually the only backup company in the world to have received financial investment directly from Citrix twice. Their customers include some small names out there like Sony, Barnes & Noble Booksellers, Vodafone, ADP Payroll Services, and the Warner Music Group, to name just a few. And from PhD, here to provide some nuggets on how to avoid losing data, ideally on a small and manageable budget, please welcome Bob Charlton. So can you give a virtual round of applause so we know you're there? Maybe jump into the question section and write clap, clap, clap. How you going, Bob?
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you very much. Well, hello, everybody. Good morning.
Well, I saw back in the 90s you were actually a managing partner. In fact, you were a VP at Sous Chef, which was a 220-seat restaurant on Long Beach Island. I'm sure you picked up a thing or two about hospitality and process.
Yes. You know, being a chef, everything is about a process. You know, if you don't add something right, it's not going to come out the way you need it to. That's a guarantee right there. But thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. Let's just start right out. I'll give you a perspective from a chef and a former restaurant owner. I was responsible for 63 employees, a 220-seat restaurant. We didn't have a liquor license, so everything was around food. But one of the most important things was the fact that I could only see 10% of everything that was going on around me, even though I was responsible for everything else. So when things happened, you had to figure out what was happening. And also, we actually lived in New Jersey on the Jersey Shore, where we'd have 2 to 6 hurricanes a year, you know, pass by the island, sometimes threatening our business. And that would lead me to actually sit back and ask myself, what happens if I lose this? Well, in around 2000, I decided to make a jump, and we still haven't figured out why that actually happened. But I went over and started doing technology sales. It started with a company called Legato. And at that time, there was an upstart company called VMware that we used to always make fun of because they were selling the emperor's new clothes of technology. They were selling the virtual servers. It's an actual server. You can't see it, but it's really there. And as much as we used to make fun of them, I'll never forget what I was told was the promise that virtualization was going to bring to everybody. Was the fact that you're going to make your data available anytime, anywhere, with no proprietary hardware, software limitations to retrieving that data. We thought that was great, but we didn't know how that was going to happen. And in 2003, Q4, a small company called EMC decided to acquire Legato, Documentum, and this small little company called VMware in acquisition in a matter of 12 weeks. And during that time, we found out just how much VMware actually was valuable because when I was moving my boxes out of the Legato offices, going into the VMware offices now in Palo Alto. But the joke was, how much hardware does it take to create a virtual environment? Now, how does this all roll up to be a part of a backup? Well, talking to a gentleman from what used to be known as Northwest Orient Airlines, he used to always tell me that the backup is like taxes. I hate it, but I still have to do it. Well, that's such a true point there. So let's talk about backup. We got backup statistics everywhere. Go onto the webs and search backup statistics, and you'll find, here are just a few, 42% don't have modern DR solutions. 40% exceed their backup window. 36% exceed their backup window by 4 hours. And everyone talks about backup. The question is, why aren't they talking about recovery of data? So why don't backup companies talk about how they do recovery? And most of the time it's because they don't want to discuss the problems that they have. You have to have the specific software version. You have to have the specific operating system version. My personal favorite was always the fact that we could never provide them the disaster recovery. They have to call support to get their data back. Just all these great things. That's why people talk about backup. So when I talk to customers, such as yourselves, in situations like this, I ask you a question, which is a polling question I think that we're going to have pulled up here. What's more important to you? The recovery of your data or the backup of your data?
So if everyone cares to answer that question, let's see what's more important to the audience. Okay, we'll close the poll now. Very interesting. 8% of you said backup of your data, and 92% of you said recovery of your data. Very interesting, Bob.
Well, that is very interesting. As a matter of fact, I hate to say this, but it actually comes down to is that I have a $20 bill in my wallet that I've been doing this since 2003. And I've been always asking customers this question when I go in to talk to them, because we're not going to talk about backup today. We're actually asking them the question, how many people do you know today that were fired because they missed a backup window? And then I always follow that up as how many were fired because they weren't able to recover their data. Obviously, recovery of the data is important. But what's the problem with backup is the fact that it's not focused on recovery. Now, 25 years ago, we had ID departments that had great budgets, lots of staff. You know, backup solution was a mainframe dump, right? Recovery. Who cared about recovery? It's on a spinning disk somewhere, right? So we're going to get the recovery back. And then in the late 90s, 2000s, we get into huge open systems. We have backup applications. We have different media. How many different medias can you guys remember using? LTO drives, DLT, optical. I'm sure there are 100 other ones that are sitting out there. How about the rip and replace solutions? One week you're using Backup Exec, the next week you're using Legato, the next week you're using ArcServe. It was just a candy land. Everyone was just ripping, replacing, putting things out until we started getting regulations. We had corporate governance, which all of a sudden backup tapes were really critical to making sure companies were actually going forward. Then we come in to virtualize. Do we virtualize or not to virtualize? Well, now we have virtual assessments. And during those virtual assessments, we always had non-critical servers. There were some application servers that could go. But there were always one or two or three physical servers that always had to be out there, right? Now, the question is, we have VMware, we have Citrix, we have Hyper-V, we have a whole bunch of other virtualization softwares coming. Are we ever going to be 100% virtual? That's a great question. This is not a polling question, but let's look at this for a second. There are a lot of people out there that their whole lives live on the data that's sitting in their environment. And there are some people that just will not move to virtual. It's just the way it is. Or there are some servers that are just so big that a virtual server is just not something that they would use. So that's always going to be up in the air. But when we have businesses that start out there, when you start small, they always start to back up to disk. They back up to tape. But technology changes. It'll change next week. It'll change next month. It'll change next year. So the quandary that most of the customers I talk with today is, how do I simplify my data recovery as the technology grows? Because what I buy today is obsolete tomorrow. So what you really need to achieve your ultimate objective. What is it? Well, the customers I've talked to, it all comes down to three things. It comes down to the cost, how to simplify your processes for recovery, your return on investment. It must be a solution that has to be integrated with your current infrastructure. And finally, the delivery. Does it actually work and deliver as advertised? So, my friend out at the Northwest Airlines sent it to me as well. Stop dancing and let me see what you're selling. So let's just go ahead and move right in and just talk about where we're at today. So what's your situation? All right, so you probably started with a physical environment and everything's being backed up, and you probably have to move to off-site. So you have a DR plan in place. There's off-site tapes. You have tape rotations. Maybe you're replicating off-site, site-to-site replication. You're moving your whole entire SAN, your whole infrastructure from two different sites. So of all the technologies, where would PhD fit in here to be able to help you? Because you're looking to add a virtual environment. Well, the first thing is PhD is the only pure 100% virtual backup solution. We are a pure virtual backup appliance. There's no additional hardware or an agent or anything that you can put on because it may not work as fast. It is a virtual appliance. We back up to disk. We don't provide native tape support, so working with a current traditional backup system, all we can do is complement and enhance those solutions that are out there today. Validation and verification is the biggest thing that people used to have. I remember with Networker, it was always, how would we verify that the backups were finished? How do I validate that the data is not corrupt? These are things that traditional backup solutions have today, but again, when you try to move into the virtual environment, sometimes it's not there. Finally, a single-step recovery. Do I have to have a legacy system sitting there backing me up? If these are your situations, please don't get my opinion on this. I fully ask you to go ahead and go to the Infotech report that can be found on the PhD website, amongst any other websites as well. It says, if managing separate virtual and physical backups, and have a look at PhD. So, 100% virtualized solution, what does this mean? Well, it first means is that there's no purchase required for a server for backup software. There are no databases or indexes. There's no SQL database. You don't need a media file index, a backup, or anything like this. We don't need a bootstrap in order to get our data back. And there's no additional Windows operating system cost. And additionally, single-step recovery. You install a virtual backup appliance or a VBA, there's no index files as part of the backup. They're all there. When we need to do a recovery, we have a hierarchy that is built. Permissions. If you have classified data that can only be seen by certain people, those permissions are all still there and in place. Finally, the most important piece, however, is the single code for Citrix and VMware. This means that the functionality for both hypervisors is identical. So the learning curve for those customers that may be running a VMware server but running Citrix Virtual Desktop, they will have the ability later this year through a single pane of glass to actually manage all those virtual systems from one GUI, whether it's VMware or Citrix. And today we actually manage all versions of Citrix from free all the way up. Backup licensing, however, again, is all based upon what the hypervisor server is. So, validation and verification. We already talked about what the traditional backups can do. They validate, they complete the backup, they make sure the data was not corrupted. The problem is that these technologies just have not kept up. The smaller technologies like a PhD Virtual have been able to go out and actually provide faster solutions. So when customers begin to hate their backup, it's when they begin to virtualize. I can't tell you how many customers I've talked to that told me they absolutely despise backup exec. However, it's not until they actually started using it for their virtual environments did they start to hate it. So, why does PhD actually complement and enhance a current traditional backup? We validate the backup was complete. we can start a VM and make sure the data is uncorrupted. If that data is corrupted, we can self-heal that. Now, we're not just talking just that single one backup. PhD Virtual uses a full synthetic full backup, meaning that if we need to, we actually can go back and check that whole entire backup to ensure that there is no corruption. And unlike a lot of the other softwares that are out there today, we've had this functionality since we opened this product in 2006. Right there on the backup storage and not a separate application, we can actually run this verification software. So the question is, why do we back up? Well, obviously to recover. But what's the one thing that we never talk about? Productivity. No one ever seems to talk about productivity when it really comes down to the bottom line, right? We always talk about how, what's our ROI? How are we going to save our operating costs? And we talk about productivity, but we really never go into it very much. So this is actually the next polling question is for each one of you, is it how many technology solutions do you need today to recover your data?
Okay, we've opened up the poll. If you want to go for it. Okay, we've got more than 80% of people have voted. Let's have a look at the results. Okay, interesting. So 2 or less, 62% of you. 2 to 4, about a third of you. And wow, there's a few people out there that have 4 or more solutions that are required to actually recover critical data. Bob?
Well, let me ask you this next question. It's not a polling question, but it's a question that you'll probably want to be asked. How many of you are required to have long-term data recovery? How many people need to keep their data for 3, 5, 7, or even more years based on current regulations and government rules? With this piece here, when we get down to it, we really need to make sure that we can recover our data quickly. So with PhD Virtual, we want to make sure that if you already have a traditional backup solution and you're moving this data off-site, okay, how do we make sure that when you need to do recovery, you only need one solution? We use a tool within our subset. It's called Open Exporter. And what this does, it will take our backup software. So let's just it'll take our backup, our monthly backups, the ones that you send off-site that you never ever want to see again. We'll take those backups, put it on a share, and then the traditional backup actually will go grab that file, write it to tape, and you'll move it off-site. 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, there could be an audit, there could be an accident, something could happen that requires you to get that data back. When that happens, you'll recover that data using the traditional backup from the tape to a disk, and then load that onto the hypervisor. There is no need for any PhD software. There is no need for a PhD legacy system at all because this is a .ovf file, which means you only need to have a hypervisor in order to recover that data. So what about the cloud? That's the next generation, right? Everyone has all these great cloud solutions out there. Send it to the cloud. You'll never see it again. All those great things. But again, it brings us back to the quandary we talked about earlier. How do we simplify data recovery as technology grows? So the first one is you have to have a plan, and you have to have a roadmap. And the first thing is, with PhD today, we actually have a seamless link to cloud storage. We're not only going to look at backup, we're also looking at archiving, as well as disaster recovery. So right now today, we have backup to cloud. We're using our virtual backup appliance not only to take the backup, and the same VBA would be used for replicate, we're also going to be using this to back up data directly to the cloud. So anyone that's using OpenStack today, we can back directly up to that provider. I was telling a customer not even 2 weeks ago that archiving is going to come back. You may remember the old EMC tried and true backup recovery and archiving that was back in the early 2000s. And everyone was talking about archiving. Well, back on the physical servers, you're right. We were all talking about archiving. Guess what? It's all coming back around again. And we're going to be talking about archiving of virtual machines. Because those virtual machines, the question now is going to come down to, if you have 3 years of data sitting on there, do you really need all 3 years to do that recovery? Or do you really need 90 days of that data? You still want to access the 3 years, but what do you need to have back? The question I always ask customers is, what do you need to have back to be functionally operational? And that's really going to be the key to archiving. And then finally, the next piece is going to be the DR in the cloud. Having the ability to actually run replicas and run virtual machines directly right out of the cloud storage, no matter where you are. That is really where the key comes in. So let me summarize the entire presentation today, especially on that last slide. PhD Virtual is going to deliver a solution that delivers the true promise of virtualization. The ability to recover your data anywhere and at any time without the proprietary limitations of software or hardware. So what's next? Well, the next is getting a data protection and recovery assessment. You need to contact Teba, our partner there in Australia, to be able to get this assessment. If you'd like to try a 15-day trial download of the PhD Virtual software, you can go right to our distributor, Track It Online, and they will actually have a download for you as well. All the quotes on the slides that you would have seen here today are actual customer quotes that are on our website. If you'd like to see those quotes or look at some of the other case studies we have available, you're more than welcome to go to the PhD website at this link to see those. We also have contact with Beth Lancaster, our distributor at Track It Online. And if you have any questions at all, you're free to contact myself, Bob Charlton, or Greg Day, who is the PhD Virtual sales rep that manages Australia.